The reading this morning is taken from Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. It's the parable of the talents, and this can be found on page 994 of the Pew Bible. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The man with 2 talents also came. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. "Master," he said, "I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you." His master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Morning, everybody. I had a new preaching experience this morning. Alan asked me to preach at the 8 o'clock service as well. So that was the abridged version. That was the easy bit. This is the full length, the unabridged version. So it's already up there. Thank you. Okay, so the parable of the talents can be sort of broken down into their constituent parts, like I've put there. 3 servants, 3 amounts of gold or 3 amounts of money, 1 boss, king, master, however you want to call him, 2 attitudes and 2 outcomes. The thing I want to look first is the attitude. 2 attitudes. 3 different amounts of money, 3 servants of differing ability, and the servants receive differing amounts of money according to their ability. So the top man, the most competent guy, he gets 5 bags of gold. Number 2 gets 2. And the least competent servant, the 3rd servant, he just gets 1 bag of gold. So there's 3 servants, 3 gifts, but 2 attitudes. And the two attitudes can be divided thus. Like in the picture, it's sort of a glass half full, glass half empty. So the first two servants see this as a fantastic opportunity. They can showcase their talent. They can demonstrate their ability, and they can prove to the boss how right he was to entrust his wealth to them. He won't regret this. And they think about when they return to the boss, his reaction when he sees how well they've done. They are going to be over the moon. And in the verse we just read, in the scripture we just read, it says that the servant with 5 bags of gold, he went off at once, he puts his money to work. His instinct tells him to invest. He can't wait to get started. Not a moment to lose. He doesn't even sleep on it. He knows straight away what he's going to do. He's going to make the money work. He's going to invest it. Second servant, pretty much the same. Third servant, very different story. He's more of a glass half empty kind of person. So he thinks about his boss, but he's got a totally different mental image. He thinks, what is this guy going to do to me if I lose his money? What's he going to do if I mess up? Oh boy, you don't want to cross this man. Play it safe, take no risks. So he buries his share. He buries his 1 bag of gold in the ground. Bury your gold in the ground. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I guess you could forget where you buried it, but so he buries his gold in the ground, plays it safe. So in effect, whereas the first two servants are busy putting the money to work, he does nothing. But there is a danger in doing nothing. A number of times in the Bible, Jesus warns against doing nothing, against being passive, against being dormant or docile. Now, we can be well aware of the teaching in the Bible that tells us not to do things. It tells us not to be angry. It tells us not to be greedy. It tells us not to be lustful, proud. It tells us not to murder, lie, steal. We're very well schooled in all that teaching. We know all the thou shalt nots. But as well as those things, we are also warned by Jesus against doing nothing. Now, I would argue that this doing nothing is not sloth, it's not laziness. It's not one of those 7 deadly sins. It's about being passive. It's about missing an opportunity. Whether to help someone in need or to pass by an opportunity, such as the third servant does. Good example is the story of the Good Samaritan. The Samaritan goes to the help of a stricken traveller, but not before the 2 other men in the picture have walked past him, a priest and a Levite. They walked by, they did nothing. That's nothing to do with laziness. But they wouldn't, for various reasons, they wouldn't help someone in need. They did nothing. Straight out of this parable, in Matthew's gospel, Jesus talks about judgment. And he says how people will be judged from the right, be separated from the right and the left. And he says, those on the right, the king will say this: come into this holy nation that has been made ready for you before the world was made. For I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me water to drink. I was a stranger, and you gave me a room. I had no clothes, and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you came to see me. However, to those on the left, he will say, go away from me, you are guilty. Go into the fire that lasts forever. For I was hungry, but you did not give me food to eat. I was thirsty, but you did not give me water to drink. I was a stranger, but you did not give me a room. I had no clothes, but you did not give me clothes. I was sick and in prison, but you did not come to see me. But then, like it says here, the people on the right will protest and they'll say, well, hold on a minute, when did this happen? So the king explains to them, because you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me. So in effect, the people are judged and condemned for doing nothing. They may have led very morally upright lives. They have been busy doing goodness knows what, but that doesn't save them. Because when it really mattered, when they had an opportunity to serve God by helping others, they blew it. They did nothing. So there was a danger in doing nothing. We might become passive and apathetic. You may have heard of this book. If you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. Very famous book written by the American pastor and author John Ortberg. And he draws this parallel between the parable of the talents and the incident of Peter walking on the water. And just as the third servant decides to play it safe by burying his bag of gold, so the 11 disciples decide to play it safe. And he says that there's like a common link between gold buriers and boat dwellers. They hate taking risks. They play it safe. The disciples stay in the boat. No doubt the prospect of walking on water sounds great, but what if you were to sink? You'd look ridiculous. So they take the easy option. So they watch from the sidelines. They become passive, and they miss an opportunity to grow in faith. The servant who buries his gold also misses an opportunity, but his mentality is to play it safe. Running through this story, this parable, is the theme. There is a huge irony in it. Who gets the cultural reference? Win a prize. Simone?
Isn't it ironic? It's a song by, can't remember her name.
Oh, can't remember her name. Anyone can? Alanis Morissette. Well done, Leo. Well done. Yes. Isn't it ironic? Yes. Thank you. So you got the song and Liam got the singer. You have to share the prize, whatever that might be. Alanis Morissette. Isn't it ironic? I was struggling for a picture that captured irony. How do you come up with a picture of irony? So Alanis Morissette is the closest I could come up with. There is a huge irony at the core of this parable. The servant who fears his boss, who's totally motivated by trying to avoid his wrath, is the one who gets his wrath, the one who gets sacked. The servant who obsesses about losing the one bag of gold that he's trusted with loses everything. I said at the start of the parable there's two outcomes. And this is the outcome for the third servant. The king says to him, take the bag of gold for him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. Throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness. So there's that huge irony. In trying to keep everything, his money, his job, his reputation, he loses it all. His desire to play safe costs him everything. What is his motivation behind burying the gold? Well, I think we touched on this previously, but I would say it was fear. Fear of failure. What if he invested the gold and those investments went pear-shaped? He fears the response of his boss. After all, he says this to his boss, I knew that you were a hard man, and his boss doesn't contradict him. So he does nothing. He buries the gold. Maybe we are stifled by that fear of God. We think that if we get something wrong, we're going to incur his wrath. We imagine that God's watching over us, waiting for us to step out of line so he can judge us and condemn us. And if we see God in those terms, then yes, we will always play it safe. Or maybe the other thing is we fear man, we fear other people's opinions of us. As soon as we do something and we open ourselves to criticism, we may get things wrong. We will always get things wrong. No one is perfect. And maybe we negatively project how things will turn out. I remember when we started doing the message bursts, and it was first flagged up, we're going to have this message burst and we're going to invite kids to come on it, and you think, are you crazy? What, any kids? These kids are going to be piling on this bus? It's going to be absolute mayhem. It's going to be terrible. But we had some fantastic sessions. We've made some really great contacts with some of the young people. It was amazing. But when I first heard about it, went to the first training session, I thought, this just does not sound good. They'll all end in tears. I can just see it. So maybe we think negatively and we project and we think about all the pitfalls. So we decide to stay in the boat or we decide to bury the treasure. best play it safe. So like I said, these are some of the reasons why we play it safe. We fear failure and how that will make us look to God, but also to man. We don't want to upset God, but we don't want to look foolish to those around us. So we play it safe and our treasure remains hidden. I just want to pick up a bit on what Alan was saying earlier, in that even if we're not, even if we're not talented, and we say, well, we'll look at this later, but even if we're not talented, there's something we can all do, and that is that we can encourage and help those who are stepping out of the boat, who are investing their gold, who are doing things. There's a lot I can see around here. I can see a lot of people who are stepping up and doing various jobs, and we can help and encourage them. On a personal level, I'd say, since I've been doing preaching, people have been very helpful, very supportive. People have come up and given me pointers, and you might want to do this, you might try this. It's been really good. And I think it's about, in the church, creating that kind of environment where people do feel that if they step up and if they try something and if they step out of the boat or whatever, that they're not going to get shot down in flames as soon as they make a mistake. So I think on a personal level, that's very important. And I feel very blessed that people have helped me with my preaching, and encourages people to take risks. Another reason to bury our treasure is this: the danger of comparison. Who understands that cultural reference? Simone again. Let's see. Yeah, it's a sketch from. Yeah, a bit before our time, but we don't a bit before our time. Very old, yes. The danger of comparison. It's the man with the least gold who decides to bury it. And maybe he looks up, like Ronnie Corbett there, he looks up the other two servants and he makes a comparison. After all, they're more talented than he is, they're trusted with more gold than he is. One has 5 bags of gold, one has 2 bags of gold, and there's little old him with just his 1 bag of gold. So small and insignificant. What does it matter about me and my little bag of gold? And maybe that's how we see ourselves. We're just not one of life's talented people. We look around the church and we see people who are more accomplished than us, more talented, more outgoing, more confident, more capable. And there's the danger of comparison. We can tell ourselves that our talent is so small and inconsequential. We would love to serve God. We would love to do more in the church, but our talent's so small and insignificant, we can't possibly make a difference. Best to step aside, keep out of the way and let the talented people get on with it. And we convince ourselves that we don't have a role to play, we can't contribute. If God had wanted me to serve him, he would have just made me more talented. He would have made me more charismatic. Me and my one little talent, me and my one little bag of gold, what can I achieve? Nothing. Unfortunately for the third servant, his boss does not see things that way. He might see himself as being insignificant, but that's not how the master sees it. He's certainly not indifferent. And we can see that in his reaction to the news that his money was just simply buried in the ground. He doesn't see the third servant as small and insignificant. His boss cares. He isn't indifferent. It's not about the quantity of gold he was trusted with. It's about what he did with it. And the boss doesn't compare the efforts of the third servant to the other co-workers. He doesn't say, well, you've just buried your gold. These are the 2 guys have doubled there. He doesn't make that comparison. Instead, have I got it out here? Yes, there we go. Instead, he makes the comparison between doing nothing and doing something. So he said, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, at least I would have received the interest. So in other words, he says, well, you've done nothing, but what you could have done is something. He doesn't expect him. He doesn't expect great things out of him. He doesn't expect him to have doubled his money like the other 2 have. But he says, what you did was nothing. That was wrong. You could have done something. This is the least you could have done. So the comparison he makes is between doing nothing and doing something. You can do something. You should have done something. God isn't indifferent to us either. Like the boss isn't indifferent, God isn't indifferent either. We won't be judged by how much talent we had, but what we did with it. We don't have to put ourselves under pressure, like I say, and believe that unless we achieve remarkable results that we've failed. We might see ourselves as being small and insignificant, but it's not the way that God sees it. So we're not judged on how talented we are, but how we use our talents. I just want to finish by saying this. There's a passage in the Bible where the disciples or the apostles come to Jesus and they say to him this. They say, Lord, increase our faith. Lord, increase our faith. How does Jesus respond? Does Jesus say to them, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come up with a fantastic 5-point plan that if you put this into practice every morning, your faith will just take off. You will see a 50%, 100% growth in your faith. It'll be amazing. Right? So the apostles come to Jesus and they say, Lord, increase our faith. And that's a good thing to ask for. They're not asking for something frivolous. They're not asking for something selfish. That's a perfectly good thing to ask for. Lord, increase our faith. How does Jesus respond? He says this. He says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to a mulberry tree, be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it'll obey you. In other words, you guys already have some faith. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be following me if you had no faith. The fact that you're following me is a demonstration that you have some faith. What you need to do is to put into practice that faith that you have, and you will see amazing things. And I think the same thing applies to us and our talents. We could spend our time wishing and praying that we were more talented, more gregarious, outgoing, accomplished, whatever. But instead, we could maybe put into use the talent that we have, no matter how small it is. And if you do, you will probably surprise yourself. I think you will surprise yourself at what you can achieve. And I bet a lot of people can stand up here and give a testimony of how they've stepped up in faith and how more than anyone else they surprised themselves by what they did. It's not about wanting more. It's not about bemoaning the fact that you have one talent and someone else has 2 and someone else has 5. It's about putting to use the talent you have. Amen.